Call a meeting to order. Good evening, everyone. My name is Richard Stewart. I'm the mayor of Coquitlam, and I'll be chairing this evening's meeting. And the reason we're starting late is because I wasn't chairing the meeting before, and it should have ended about 15 minutes ago, but it only ended about 5 minutes ago, and so we were rushing. Not relevant, no. I want to acknowledge a group of people in Liberal Red cheering on for the federal election.
Oh, you're in trouble now.
I actually think that looking at the early results, you have reason for smiling. But anyway, I hope everyone in the audience has had a chance to vote. If you haven't had a chance to vote, well, you're too late. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Our first item this evening is a presentation by the Kinsmen Club of Coquitlam. I'd like to invite Mr. John Kingsbury to come forward to present on the activities of the club.
We don't get to do it very often, but welcome again, Mayor Kingsbury. Would you like to do it from this chair or from where you're standing?
You willing to give it up that quick just because of the rules again?
No, I was only taunting you.
No, we're actually not in red Liberal colors. We're in redneck colors. We're all Kinsmen. So.
Okay.
And we were Kinsmen in red long before the Liberals were even in red.
Been to the party. Yeah.
Tonight it gives me good pleasure to introduce our gang. Kinsmen Club is growing quite substantially in the last couple of years. We're all up to 26 members now. And we do over 40 events a year with the food wagons that we got from the community by doing projects and raising money, and it's been a pretty good run. We have, at this time, would like to introduce Christopher Kierans, who's our incoming or our president at the time, and he would introduce the boys here for you. So, Christopher, you want to introduce them?
Thanks, Right. Do I have to address you the chair? Okay. Honorary Mayor Richard Stewart, City Councilors, Kinsmen, and public guests. My name is Christopher Kierans. I am club president 2015-2016 Kin year, representing the Kinsmen. I would like to thank the guys from the Coquitlam Kinsmen Club to show up and support Mr. John Kingsbury today. I would like to you guys please stand up and we'll do a proper recognition. The left of me is Tor Bogwell, club secretary and vice president. Past president last year. King Vince Mills, vice president this year. King Ken, life member. Life membership, King Ken. Life member Kin Bruno, life member Kin Pete, and we have JR, Kin JR, club registrar, Kin Ron Mitchell, life membership. We have Kin Chris. Is he a life member? Okay. Kin Jim, a new club member. We have Kin Philip. He's our club risk management and life member. We have Kin Brent, new club member. And last but certainly not least, Kin John, life member. Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
So in putting this presentation together, I realized how much I missed the city and having somebody with the ability to do PowerPoint presentations, because this one's kind of crude.
I've been dying to do this for many years. You have 5 minutes.
5. Starting when? Okay, we'll go on to the first presentation. We started this year in March, and we did a very large project at the Soccer Association, and it was around 800 kids, and we fed them and did all the stuff that we need to do there. Secondly, Secondly, we were over to Price Smart opening in Surrey. We move around an awful lot because we have sponsors that we work for and we demonstrate their food products for them. We're trying to make people or understand to eat better and more wholesome foods rather than greasy hamburgers and greasy, hot dogs. We actually have brats, better prepared sausages. We have Reeser salads, and we have Johnsonville, and also we have who the heck's the other one? Anyway, Little Potato Company, and I don't know if anybody's had the little potatoes, but they're really good. And so we go around and we demonstrate their food products as well as doing these events. This one was the reopening of Price Smart in Guildford, and as you can see, there was a lot of people lined up there. I think there was like 2,000 people there. Flickered now. Yeah, I got the name now. There you go. Now it's working good. Okay, secondly, after that, we do a jamboree on the trail, and it's over in Belcarra Park. Belcarra Park is an ideal venture. It's called Jamboree on the Trail. Scouts, Cubs, and beavers from all over this area up here come to this event. They go up over some of the hills in Belcarra Park. There's some phenomenal trails up there that the GBRD has put in, or Metro Vancouver now. They have a big jamboree there once a year. We cook all the food for them, and they have their hikes through the trails and come on back down. And it's a good day for them, and it's a great venue right on the water there, so it's a beautiful spot. Then, of course, the next we do our Como Lake Fishing Derby. I think it was the 43rd derby that we've done at Como Lake Park. There's the Fort Coquitlam Fish and Game Club that hosts with us, and they do all the weighing in for the fish and all that kind of stuff. And beside that is famous Bob McNary, who's on a leave of absence, but he's still stubborn and miserable and around, so we can't get rid of him. But he has his George Foreman grill, and he can do like 80 wieners at one time. He's pretty proud of that grill. So. The Derby itself, these are some of the participants. We kind of go through these fast because we don't want to go there. So there's prizes at that tournament for strangest catch, biggest catch, most unusual catch. They have a multitude of prizes. We give $500 to the Fish and Game Club. They go and buy a whole bunch of prizes. And they just keep giving out prizes for like a half an hour or an hour there. It's quite an event. And thanks to some of the councillors that come out and show and help, and it's a pretty good event. So just more of the people on the lake. You can't use a motor on there, and was supposed to be over 65 and under 16, but I think that's changed now. But it's a pretty popular event. So June was really busy. We did still competitions for the P&E up in Burnaby. These are some of the ones that we do. We just pay for everything. We supply the food, the product, and cook it up and serve it. We were at Roy Stibb School, did a share dinner with Share for the people in that area. Foursquare Church we did for the homeless, one there. Brain Sprint is over in Burnaby in the park just off Sperling. That's for survivors of brain tumors and brain cancers. And then we do the YMCA Healthy Heart one up on Como Lake Avenue. That one is for people that are involved in the Healthy Heart program at the center, at Poirier Center, and I'm not sure about down here, but it's a great program, and it keeps people on track and make sure that everybody gets healthy. To do these events, we set up Healthy Hearts. I think we set up 25 canopies for that one because they don't have the wherewithal to do that. So we not only cook the food, we supply the canopies, we set them up, take them down, and move along. So in June, July, for us, are really busy. We are at Teddy Bear Picnic in Spirit. I was there. The wagons that we have, we share with other service groups in Coquitlam. And on this one here, it's actually the Optimist Clubs that does the cookout, and we supply the trailer. And we also are able to demonstrate the food products there. So it's a double whammy for extra things for the kids and people that are at that event. I'm probably going to go way over. The MS Walk we do every year. We supply all the food and everything for lunch for after the walk. It's well attended, and it's something that's one of our major sponsors, and we go out and sponsor MS Walk wherever we can. So starting this year, we started to do more golf tournaments. What we do is we go out and we set up at a golf tournament, and sometimes we'll feed all of the golfers at the start, or sometimes we'll just set up on a hole and we'll just feed them as they go through. The ones we did this year was Mayor's Coquitlam Classic. We were set up on a hole up there and people went through. We did the Vancouver Transportation Golf Committee over at Meadow Gardens. Woody's Dare to Dream Foundation is a foundation for assisting children that would not otherwise get into health and arts programs. So they have a set of criteria that's on their webpage to see that. And we have our own Kinsmen Foundation golf tournament at Mayfair Lakes. We have a large foundation that's supported by all the clubs across Canada, and it gives out a lot of bursaries. I'll tell you about that in a minute. One of the ones that's a real heartbreaker that we go to is Possibilities Barbecue in Central Park. These two girls that are in the front of this picture are absolutely phenomenal. They are smiling like that day and night, all the time. Their wheelchairs will pick them up, stand them up, lay them down, do everything you can imagine. They go up, they'll lift them up right to your eyesight now, and they just are infectious with their attitude. And so we supply all the food and do that for them every year. It's a real good event. So about this time this morning, I was getting tired of searching for pictures because I'm not the most organized guy when it comes to pictures. I'm going to go back. There. Yeah. No, I'm going the wrong way. Okay. Back. Yeah, okay. One that way. One, there you go. Okay, fire department used our wagons quite a bit. We were happy to lend them to them. We don't charge anything. They did their pink pancake breakfast this year. It was quite popular. The only thing now I realize that this picture is from a year ago when they did their fire pit. But anyway, they did do it this year, and we were happy to help them out with the grills and everything. So about this time, I was getting sick to death looking for pictures. So I'm going to run through some of the events that we've done for the city and with the city. We did the RCMP Academy at Poirier. We did a lunch there. Staples, we did for school kits. They raised 500 kits for kids going back to school. We did the blueberry pancake at Farmers Market up at Poirier. Thrift store on hospice, at the hospice store, when they have their special, we do a lunch for them. Cottonwood Park, we did that with the City Park crew. They are an infectious group, that City Park crew. They did a phenomenal job on Cottonwood Park there. They had kids coming out of those apartments like crazy again. We were able to keep ahead of them just barely. We fed them all lunch. So then we do a Meridian RV fall show, which is on the bypass in Port Coquitlam. We do that for them because they store all our trailers and they winterize our trailers and look after our equipment for us. So we do shows for them, and they do a spring and a fall show. Barnes Harley Davidson show in Langley, we do that. It's a pretty good event, and we don't have trouble getting people to that. Last year, the donations at that place just for food, we didn't charge, we just asked for donations. We got some donations there last year. And the bike long trek is way out down by the border at Hazelmere. There's people that run here to our Brown Cultus Lake back to Hazelmere, and that's a long bike ride for a day. And so they go on Saturday, and we go out there and we do the lunch for them when they come back after the race. So we have 3 more Santa Claus breakfasts to do at elementary school this year. We did 1,200 lunches for TELUS Mobility in 2 hours. That's quite an accomplishment because we take 2 trailers and we cook all the food, and they come down 500 at a time. And that was a full meal deal with little potatoes, salads, brats, and onions and everything. So we can handle a pretty big crowd. We're sort of gearing up for larger stuff, so we don't have to work at as many. And then we did the Ioko Ghost Days over in Ioko Town Center Park, which was about 800 folks, and it was a lot of fun. And out of the 40 events we did this year, only 2 days did we get rained on. So we were very, very fortunate this year. It was a great year for what we were doing. So at this time, I'd like to invite the mayor, Stuart, and Ken Phillip, Jewel to come forward, and also our president, Christopher. Come on up. You're supposed to be listening.
I was just trying to figure out how to get you to keep to your 5 minutes.
Yeah, well, you know what can I say? We only come once a year. So we'd like to present you with a check for the Coquitlam 2016 55 Plus Game Society, which would go to Philip, being on that society, and he in turn is going to give it to you. Well, there you go.
We're going to give it back to me for Ken to put in the bag.
Thank you very much. All right.
So hopefully that'll kick off the games.
Here, okay.
Oh.
He's trying to pretend he's in charge.
There you go. Okay, and secondly, we would be remiss, Richard, where are you going? Or, I mean, your worship. We had this for a while, and we never had a chance to get it actually to you, so we've, as a club, there's 26 of us strong, and we would like to make you an honorary member of the Kinsmen Club of Coquitlam. There you go.
Well, thank you very much. Well, thank you, Christopher. Appreciate it.
One more, gentlemen. One more quick.
Thank you. There we go.
Okay, one quick commercial, I'm out of here.
The last one.
I went to. Okay. This is volunteerism, and there's only a couple things you can read it over. The biggest thing here is last year we did a lot of work in the community. I don't know how you value community spirit now and volunteer spirit, but we spent over 1,600 hours in our club at various events last year, and that's the equivalent of about $30,000 in minimum wage. And we actually put another $9,000 in that in the value of our equipment that we took and used for this for the project we're doing. We're now asking for people if they're interested in becoming members of the Kinsmen Club. That's quite an opportunity. It's not only about what we do, but it's about the personal development relation that you can build up relationships, build up personal skills. And so a lot of us started, like myself, when you went to scouting, to Kinsmen, to council, to being an old buddy guy in here. So we're asking for your support to help Kinsmen and keep the spirit alive. We're having fun and we're loving it, and we have information here for the people who are in charge of membership. Melissa is here. We are a kin co-ed club. We're not a Kinsmen anymore. So, my information is on there, and it's all on our webpage. So our potato sponsor, Little Potatoes, Kia West gives us a truck every year to use to haul the trailers around. So I'm supposed to say everybody's supposed to be in a Kia. And Impact Canopies, our big sponsor, we get a lot of sponsorship from them. And so it is a great opportunity for you to grow old and become an old Kinsman like me. So thank you for thank you very much for your information. And any questions? So you can quit. Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
I will say this on behalf of council to the kin and to all our service clubs for that matter. The work you do in our community is invaluable. We it improves our community, it builds community spirit, it really lets our projects shine, it lets our events shine, and it makes youth, I think, begin to appreciate the value of volunteerism and giving back to a community. We were earlier today speaking about a playground that exists in Town Center Park, built by the Kinettes, essentially, with support from the Kinsmen. A wheelchair accessible playground, our first truly accessible playground in Coquitlam, and it's events like that, it's contributions like that that are tremendously valuable, and we want to acknowledge and thank you for the ongoing work that you've done in our community. However, John Kingsbury was 9.5 minutes over his 5 minutes, and so you're free to go now. Thank you very much. Mr. Clerk.
Nope. The next item, item 2, is our second presentation. I'd like to invite the 2015 community, pertaining to the 2015 Communities in Bloom Award. We have a presentation by Aaron Davidson, who's the Community in Bloom Community Committee, but we also have a brief video which we'd like to show first.
Is that how you thought it was going, Aaron? No.
Although before John Kingsbury leaves, I do have to just share with him that I noticed that the Daisy Day, that the Kinsmen trailer was a Daisy Day this year, and we didn't see it on the list. So.
Outstanding, yes. We did see it there, yes. Outstanding. Love it.
Okay, so I guess I better start by saying that I've just really loved being part of the Community in Blooms Committee. And really, it's right up my alley. Beautification and environmental responsibility and building healthy communities. So really, those were the strategic initiatives that are involved with the Community in Blooms project. And this project really is such an incredible collaborative team effort. So if you look around the room, you can see some representatives here today. So we have the community members that were part of some of the planning process. There's a number of department heads in here tonight, and really, honestly, we can't thank you enough for supporting and encouraging your staff to participate in this project. The judges commended Mayor and Council for showing vision and really encouraging this project as well. And I think that there will be some lasting legacies as a result of Community in Blooms, and we're really proud of the results, which we'll share with you in just a minute. So, I mean, honestly, very collaborative team effort. When we went out with the tour on the judges, I was one of the members that had the privilege of joining the tour group, and we visited various parts of Coquitlam. And my goodness, we have such a fantastic city. There's so many parts of it I never even knew were out there, actually. And so there's an incredible offering out there. But I think one of the things that resonated the most with me was the civic pride and the passion that both the community volunteers and the city staff demonstrated that day. So really want to thank everybody for going above and beyond and putting a great project together. And as a result, we have a great outcome. And that's when we were supposed to show the video and announce to you afterwards what the results were. So I guess we'll just move to that part of the presentation and share with you that Coquitlam actually achieved 5 blooms. And that's actually really significant because for the first, I think it's the first time, is what I heard, that first time entry has ever achieved that result. So it means that we're officially a 5-bloom community. And so now we'll start planning for 2016, and hopefully we'll gain the same kind of support from everyone and make that an even bigger and better project. So tonight we like to present Mayor and Council with the certificate that we have, and also there was an honorable mention for the Heritage Award that there was an honor of excellence for the heritage cultural component. So we have a vase that represents that part of the award, and then we have the Community in Bloom Award for you tonight. So if you can come up and share a photo with us all, that'd be great. Come on, Dan. Did everyone notice Dan's suit? Okay. Is it?
Why don't we get all council?
Yeah, I think we were going to have everybody in council join in the photo.
We have to go nuts that. We're going to get everybody in there.
Okay, we have to go to the other side.
No, it's all.
Short photographer syndrome again. What's the matter? Daddy, it's okay. We're cool.
You get one side, I'll get the other. Yeah, maybe just stand up here.
My camera. Hey guys, I can stand there. Really? Stand there. Okay, I'll stand there. Kathleen, get up here now. Get in there. Don't jump.
Okay, I'm protecting Jenny.
Protect me. Somebody's there to catch you. Hang up, down your wife. Okay, folks, here we go. Right here. Big smiles. Hang on a second. I can see everybody. Beautiful. Yeah, hair looks great. Nice. Hold that. With the test. And another test. How am I doing? Play some music. Look at that. Gorgeous. And again. Last one. One more. Awesome. Congratulations, folks. Thank you. How about you share? scary. We'll be paying more.
Okay, if we could get the Communities in Bloom Committee to please hang around. The Communities in Bloom Committee is ignoring me right now and leaving the room. If we could get them to please hang around. If we could get the Communities in Bloom Committee to hang around, we're going to advance. I'm going to ask Council to advance our item 7, which is the Communities in Bloom entry results, the official staff report related to the results. If you could come on down. I don't hear any objection to altering the agenda. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item 7 pertains to the 2015 Community in Bloom entry results. The staff recommendations that Council express thanks to the Coquitlam Communities in Bloom Community Committee members, community partners, and participating local businesses for their contribution to the Coquitlam 2015 Community in Bloom's entry.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, seconded by Councillor Asmundson, who, well, he moved it, but he was the second one to move it. All in favor? All opposed? There's only a couple of us are opposed, so that seems good. Carries unanimously. With our thanks, I want to thank the committee on behalf of the all of council, all of our community, the hard work, the inspiration. Understand that the cutoff is 82, and we received a solid 87 or something like that, which is unheard of. 88, which is absolutely unheard of. Particularly for a first-time entry, and I think in large measure I'm going to give a substantial amount of that credit, and she's going to shake her head or run out of the room or something, but I'm going to give her credit anyway. Kathleen Reinheimer has worked with Communities in Bloom and has a passion for Communities in Bloom as a judge for many years on committees related to it. And it really showed when she spoke to me about this 6 years ago when I was first elected as mayor, and I dragged her into my office to find out more about this thing, and she spoke with passion right after she realized she was allowed to talk about it in Coquitlam. And I just take my hat off to her for the work that she's done in the intervening years, but I'm going to give all the credit tonight to a committee that volunteers that did an absolutely stunning job. The staff support that you had, the community that got behind you, and the passion that shone through in every moment. Thank you. Mr. And now to say it much more eloquently, Councillor O'Neill.
No, I just had a little more context about the tremendous achievement. I did a little investigation and found out, wow, we won this Heritage Award, one of the things we're really celebrating. And I thought, well, how many other awards were handed out in the province? Maybe every community got something, maybe there's 75 different awards handed out. There were only 2 other awards handed out like this. Whitehorse was given a Tidiness Award, and Cache Creek received an award for Resilient Community Spirit. So of all the entries, just those 2 handed out, that's pretty significant. And this was a regional, not national or international competition at this stage, because we're just new back in the game, and we just hit it out of the park. Really tremendous. So in terms of the 5 blooms, well, part of the context there was I wanted to know how many blooms can you possibly get? You can only get 5 blooms. That's the top. And there's different standards at different levels of gold or silver or something. But at this level, our mark, it's not delineated in any different level. We just are 5 blooms, and that's the top that you can get right now. So congratulations on a job well done. Knowing that context, it makes this even more special. So congratulations to everyone.
Thank you very much, Councillor O'Neill, for that context, because it does it, and it truly underscores the achievement. Much appreciated. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Next item 3 is minutes of the regular council meeting held on Monday, October 5th. Staff recommendations that these minutes be approved.
Moved by Councillor Towner, seconded by Councillor Hodge. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 4 is minutes of the Multiculturalism Advisory Committee meeting of Wednesday, September 16th. Recommendation to receive.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor O'Neill. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 5 is minutes of the Coquitlam 125th Anniversary Steering Task Force meeting of Wednesday, October 7th. Staff recommendations that these minutes be received.
Moved by Councillor Wilson, second by Councillor Hodge. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Shall we move the action item to
Yes.
relevant report?
Thank you, Your Worship. The committee at their meeting of October 7th made a recommendation. This recommendation is covered in a more complete manner in the staff report, which has some specific details around the allocation of funding. So my suggestion would be to forgo this recommendation in order to consider the one later in the meeting, but to offer the committee thanks for their efforts at that meeting in order to come back with a compromise.
Any objection? Nope. Go ahead, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you. Item 6 is a proposed subdivision of agricultural property within the Agricultural Land Reserve at 4300 Oliver Road. Staff recommendations that Council authorize referral of this application to the Agricultural Land Commission with Council support for the proposed subdivision.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Reid. I'll speak to this. We're challenged a little bit in this region, well, we're challenged significantly in this region in that our enormous shortage of land is putting enormous pressure on our agricultural land, as well as on our industrial land, but primarily on our agricultural land. And one of the issues that many communities have identified as being a potential failure of the agricultural land reserve's success at protecting viable farmland is subdivision. Subdivision of farmland into smaller parcels, and therefore, and thereafter, rather, the construction of typically a very large house, quite often in the middle of the farmland or some distance from the roadway. I know Councillor Hodge sits with me at Metro Vancouver, and we're dealing with the same issues there as well as at Metro Vancouver's Regional Planning and Agricultural Committee, where community after community are having to develop some type of zoning regulations. The rest of us have minimum side yard, front yard setbacks. Some communities are now establishing maximum setbacks to try to tuck the property, tuck the residents and any auxiliary residences, and they're allowed one typically auxiliary residence as well on a property, into a corner, so as to retain that 90% of the farmland if it's possible, and to somehow restrict the size of dwellings that can be built on what is reported in this report to be the handing down of a farmland to next generations. All too often, the handing down of farmland to next generations produces a 20,000 square foot mansion with a helicopter pad. And so I'm trying to figure out what kinds of things do we have in place. We don't have very much farmland. We don't have very many farms. Are we in need of copying those communities that have already addressed this issue related to the location and size of the house on the subdivided property? Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Some very astute opening remarks there. Just to respond most directly to your question, I don't think Coquitlam's quite in the same boat that the Richmonds and Deltas and Langleys and maybe portions of Surreys are around this. First, our agricultural lands aren't that extensive. We really have a main concentration, and this is one of the key pieces in the concentration that's out on the east side along the Pitt River. I think it shows in there. One of the attachments shows the subject property, and then in relation to some of the other parcels that are in the ALR out there, sort of around the De Beauveau Slough and the Pitt River. So it's not a large area. And then the other pocket of ALR land in Coquitlam is the Colony Farm property just off of Lougheed Highway. Certainly the fragmentation of agricultural parcels can be a concern. In this case here, though, we're dealing with a really sizable parent parcel that's proposed to be split into 3 lots. And I'll use the old imperial measures because I think we can probably better relate to those. So the 3 parcels would be, one would be 45 acres, one would be almost 70 acres, and one would be slightly more than 50 acres. So those are significant holdings on their own. We had done some research, and the staff were familiar with some ALR applications in and around the Lower Mainland area. And so we did some checking, did some research, and for berry farms, it's the research has shown that an 8-hectare or 20-acre minimum is workable or feasible for that. So we're well above that sort of minimum threshold size. To your point about the monster mansions you can see on some of these parcels, I think you see some of that ironically across the Pitt River and Pitt Meadows. That would be one of the things we would want to look at, certainly at the staff level, and if council has some thoughts, we'd welcome that. If this proposal gets to the subdivision stage. It's here before council tonight because they're proposing a subdivision within the ALR, and the way that system is set up, the Agricultural Land Commission looks for the City of Coquitlam Council comments on this before they process. They want to know basically if Coquitlam Council's in favor or not, if they have concerns or comments. So this is why this application is here tonight for council's consideration and feedback. Any council resolution along with this report would then be forwarded on to the ALC, the Land Commission, and they would take that into account when they're looking at the subdivision proposal. If the Land Commission ultimately supports, they may place some conditions around that. It would then come back and it would be dealt through our subdivision application process, i.e. at a technical level with staff and ultimately the approving officer. It would be through that process there. Certainly we'd be looking at things, if it clears all those hurdles and gets to that stage of actually a subdivision application proceeding, we would be looking at things like access points, like house footprints, house locations, so and not only that, but also septic field locations because they're out beyond the sanitary sewer, to look at how these properties could be utilized and for residents on them, but at the same time not impairing or negatively affecting their agricultural capabilities. So that'd be the sort of thing we'd be looking at that stage. Now, if council has some comments that way, again, we'd be pleased to take note of that.
I think that adequately addresses my concern is not so much to express opposition to the subdivision, but rather to make sure we're prepared with a regulatory framework that allows the protection of the agricultural land even after subdivision. We'll recall there's three members of council that will recall that if you look at attachment 4, the furthest west parcel at Cedar and Victoria at the western end of the DeBoval Slough was one that came before council a number of years ago, oddly enough, by someone who was just in council chambers, and it became an equestrian parcel rather than, and so now is no longer you can't grow anything on it anymore. It was in the agricultural land reserve and is now residential, large-scale residential, and the agricultural component is horses. So I just want, we don't have much farmland. You said it yourself. Our duty, though, remains to make sure we're at least cognizant of the challenges the entire region has in preserving what little we have. Councillor Marsden.
Thank you. Question with regards to comment on the staff analysis on page 2. It speaks to the fact that the fragmentation will not negatively impact the long-term economic viability, and I'm curious as to the analysis that was undertaken to determine the economic viability of a farm. Was it related just to what you spoke to, the acreage itself?
I think it's just a reflection of their really good blueberries. They're delicious. Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship, and through the chair. No, that was the report I was referring to when staff, and to be honest, we don't get a lot of these ALR applications, so it's a little bit of an oddity. Some of the staff working on it, we're familiar with ALR applications in other municipalities, and we're aware of some analysis that's been done elsewhere, I believe up the valley, looking at berry farms, blueberry farms in particular, and what is the sort of the optimal or minimum size farm unit to make that sort of operation viable, like how much crop area you need and the support area and residents and so on and so forth. And we've done some research, and this is the report that's mentioned in the staff report from Ryerson University, where they've done some analysis and had concluded that it was an 8-hectare, 20-acre minimum berry farm was necessary to be economically viable as a business operations.
There was no specific analysis done on this particular parcel to speak to how many tons of blueberries come out of it on an annual basis as to whether or not that's economically viable.
Through the chair, no. This was an analysis that staff had done separately from the applicant. In observation, it's a pretty fertile area out there. You go out there, it's certainly popular with the bears down by the park.
It could impact its economic viability.
They may be negatively affecting the economic viability, but no, it's all joking aside, it's productive land, and this is the unit size they think that's sufficient.
Okay, and to the comments the mayor made with regards to concerns with the agricultural land reserve and changes to it or construction, in this case perhaps of some family homes limiting the property itself. Is there any reports done that speak to other types of crops that might flourish in this type of land versus just blueberries?
Through the chair, no, there hasn't been. This is an area that more suits itself, I think, due to the soil and probably the groundwater conditions would favor, that type of berry cultivation than anything else.
All right, I thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yep. Again, similar questions. I'm glad you, Mayor Stewart, raised the questions. I had similar questions. I actually, we only just got this late last week, so since I've reached out to a couple of people I know in other communities, and I haven't unfortunately been able to, they haven't been able to get back to me, but I had similar questions, just how this is being dealt with in communities where there's far more agricultural land and they deal with this on a more frequent basis. You mentioned that there's the possibility of putting some conditions on this, or I'm not sure if other communities have done this. My concerns, again, would be house placement, house size, and even the potential for future subdividing, because now that it becomes 3 parcels, while all of them are in excess of 20 acres and viable for berry farming, next generation may say, well, I want to split it in 3 or 4 for my kids, and this leads to further fragmentation at a time that we should be looking for consolidating and increasing farm sizes. So I don't know what our next step is. I certainly would like more information about what our role is, what we can do before we just either approve or send it on to the Land Commission, which I gather is our next step. So sort of like the liquor permitting, we don't really have the role, but we get the chance to sort of comment before it goes on. And I'd like to sort of maybe know, in finer detail, what our comment would be, or what sort of things we can comment and comments that we can make.
Your Worship, good questions there. Again, as I said, at this point, it's the applications before council as part of a referral to the Land Commission. So if there is there's the resolution, and if you want to add to that or some commentary, I'm sure that could be captured, and so that could be passed on to the Land Commission so they can take that into consideration when they deliberate on this. Certainly if there's some direction from council to staff that we would take into account when it reaches the subdivision application process, if there's a development variance permit required or a conservation permit for land filling, that would then bring it back before council. We can keep council posted as this application proceeds on. Those would be some of the ways for council to stay abreast of this. But certainly, if there are some concerns or questions at this point, you can make those clear, and that can be passed on to the Land Commission.
Yeah, and I note the staff comment that there is no loss of ALR land, but that's potential is certainly there, even if it's just through the footprint of the house and presumably some yard, fill that's required for that. So I think there, in the overall percentage is small, but it begins to sort of change that land use. Albeit, I certainly want to make sure that the family who owns it continues to be able to run a viable farm. I'd hate to see the land just left. So it's a fine line between, recognizing the work that farmers do, the investment that they put into their land, and at the same time making sure that we protect farmland for future generations and protect our food sources here, especially food that can be grown this close to home. So my comments would be that I want to make sure that any future housing that's put on there is done with as least impact on the agricultural value of the land, placing the homes close to the road so that we don't have driveways and a lot of other things leading into them. Because the mayor was right, when you drive through some of these other communities and they're big homes sitting in the middle of a farm with tennis courts and everything else, and I don't want to prevent a family from having their children live on the land, but at the same time I want to make sure that we're not just going to be setting up mansions in the middle of farms. So that would be my comment, is making sure that this can be done in such a way as to protect as much of the land as we can.
Thank you, Councillor Hodge. Councillor Asmundson.
No.
No. Councillor Reid, then.
I have no problem with the subdivision of this land, only because they're significantly big pieces. And if for some reason the blueberries suddenly became unpopular because some scientist from somewhere in the world decided that we shouldn't be eating anything blue, which is what happens every 10 years or so, somebody decides something healthy now is not healthy 10 years from now, at least the farms at least could perhaps break into other kinds of crops, and there's got to be something else that will grow up there. My concern is, when we were talking about the large house review, I had mentioned, Mr. McIntyre, about putting a cap on how big a house you could actually build within the city of Coquitlam, and whether it be 4,500 or 5,000 square feet or whatever it may be. My question to you is, if we had such a cap under our large house review, would it apply to agricultural lands, or do they not have the right to also have a certain amount of outbuildings as such?
Through the chair, the large house review is more focused on the RS1 and some of the other single-family zones, and this would be the A3 agricultural resource zones.
That's why I'm asking.
So, I guess if there had been that direction of that provision to set a maximum building size, it would have to then apply to the A3 zone. My thoughts again are that if there's concerns and comments from council to this effect, I think this can be captured in relayed to the Land Commission so they are aware of that. I would imagine they probably share some of the same concerns. And I think then in their deliberations around this proposed subdivision, they'll want to address that. If it does come back to the city as a subdivision application, I think we have some ability to deal with that as well at that point.
I think we should have another conversation then. I am certainly not done with the large home review, and I think there's others around here who are not. I really do want to see us put a cap on any building in the city of Coquitlam that should go beyond some particular square footage that's yet to be determined. But my comment here would be what the outbuildings they are allowed to have. I don't want to see like a 20,000 square foot barn for one little piggy and a horse, and used for all kinds of other purposes. So those are my concerns, and my concerns also on the size of the residence. And I would wonder if we are allowed to put a covenant on that it could not be subdivided any less than the acreage that's being now given, that this is the first one. So I have significant difficulties with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Zerillo.
Thank you. My questions relate to the recommendation. The recommendation says that we would push this application forward with council support. And I'm just wondering, do we have any community input at this point in time in relation to the community's feeling about pushing an application like this forward?
Through the chair, no, we don't. It's It's an application that is that goes through the Agricultural Land Commission's process, sort of in coordination with the City of Coquitlam. It's not like a rezoning or an OCP amendment or a development variance permit. There's no statutory requirement for notification or hearings or consultation on that. So again, I think with the ALC's process, this is where they're looking to the City of Coquitlam and Coquitlam Council in particular to be that sounding board, that local sounding board, to give that input so the Land Commission, who sits in Burnaby or wherever, they have some sense of what the local thought might be.
So food security is a growing topic right across Canada, and I'm just not comfortable with that wording with council support, because at this point in time, I haven't heard about a food security plan for the City of Coquitlam or for the Tri-Cities. And I think to say that I would support this, and it's council's will, but for me, I just don't feel comfortable with it at this point in time without community input and without some discussion around this council table about food security now and in the future. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Asmussen.
Through to Mr. McIntyre, the big decision being made on this is from the Agricultural Land Commission and their responsibilities on this. If it is even subdivided into 3 parcels, does it have to be farmed, and does the agricultural land have any powers over land being left fallow?
Your Worship, that question gets to the flip side of regulation of agricultural lands, and the answer simply is no. There's a zoning in place, and that's sort of superseded by its status of being in the ALR. It basically only permits agricultural and some ancillary type uses, but it doesn't compel those activities to take place.
Can the agricultural land and their recommendations, if they approve, recommend placement of where the houses should be for the better agricultural use, or is that strictly up to the city's discretion?
Again, I think if they hear those comments from Coquitlam Council, I think it's be something they can turn their attention to. And again, if it reaches the subdivision stage, that's something we'd want to look at. But I think that's something that's fair game for council to comment on.
I would be interested to know their opinions on those type of issues. If it is to be subdivided, where are the better places to locate the houses from their expertise? We can't control outbuildings. A farm has a right to have outbuildings. Agricultural land also allows for hot houses and different type of stuff on agricultural land also. So we don't have that control over that. But for the placement of the buildings, I'd like to have some of their input moving this forward.
Okay. Mr. McIntyre. Oh. I thought maybe this glare or something, I'm not sure.
Thank you, Worship. No, if there's other council comments or questions, would welcome those, but maybe be so bold, might want to just maybe amend the recommendation then to capture within that some of the sentiment being expressed by council. I'm just jotting down some wording here, but if there's any other questions or comments from council, I'll take those first, and then I can offer some suggested wording if council wishes.
Okay. Mr. McIntyre, Councillor Reid would like to know the wording of her amendment.
Okay.
Just one moment, please.
Council authorized referral of the application to the ALC with the following concerns.
With council support for the proposed subdivision, noting particular concern about the size, number, and placement of buildings on the subject properties.
Not to exceed ½ an acre. No, that's good.
Mr. McIntyre, perhaps you can help me here. I have similar concern with the support of the subdivision. To what extent does councils have to reply with, yes, we support, the subdivision. I guess what I'm saying is, can we refer it to the Agricultural Land Commission with our concerns about this, full stop? That saying we have concerns that prevent us from wholeheartedly supporting the application or completely supporting the application or something like that.
What I basically said.
Certainly, if council doesn't feel comfortable with the verb support, you know, it's they are authorizing the referral of this application to the Agricultural Land Commission for the commission's consideration, noting particular concern about the size, number, and placement of new buildings on the subject properties.
We're being less prescriptive than that, noting concern over the possibility that subdivision will reduce the percentage of the property that can be used for productive agriculture because of buildings or whatever. And I'm comfortable leaving it in staff's hands to write the letter of support or write the letter of referral if council accepts that as the premise that we're doing. And I don't know that I have council support on this one yet.
Well, that's where we were going, so.
Yeah. Again, Your Worship, if council is comfortable with us advancing the application to the Agricultural Land Commission for their consideration, noting concerns with in those items that were listed below.
I take that as Councillor Reid's amendment.
Yeah, without the word support.
Right. Advancing the application to the Land Commission, noting concerns with.
That's the amendment. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Asmussen. And discussion on the amendment? Okay. Q2. On the amendment, Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, so I'm unclear about what the actual, I'm trying to do, act says. Does the Agricultural Land Commission or Agricultural Land Reserve Act actually say that this is the process and it has to go forward with support from the council or not supported by the council? Does the act actually call for a declaration of support or non-support? And so I'm loath to support this amendment without knowing what's actually called for. And if one of the staff members can't specifically answer that, I think we should defer this so we'll find out for sure. Because if it's really an either or, then if we pass the amended motion, it'll bounce back to us, I guess. You know, the ALC might say, well, no, the Act says you have to support it or not support it. So I was in the middle of trying to do some research on it, but it came up too quickly. So I think staff should perhaps try to find out, unless they can answer right now.
Mr. McIntyre, are you all-knowing?
Well, Your Worship, I'll cite what's in the report, and then I'll turn to my colleague Raoul, who's worked at Surrey and Richmond, so he may have some more immediate memory. But in the report, the author notes that in order for the ALC to review the application, council must first forward the application with recommendations or comments to the Land Commission. I don't think you're bound to make recommendation. It could be comments, and if there's concerns. But Raoul, you've maybe dealt more recently with the ALC than I have.
Thanks, Jim. Yes, lots of history with subdivision, the ALR, and my own background. My recollection is under applications requiring subdivision approval by the Land Commission, council plays a key role. First of all, you can decide not to forward the application at all. So council can decide, no, it's not consistent with what our goals are, our policies, and it can be ended right here with council. Council can also forward it to the Land Commission without comment, with no overriding comment or recommendation, or they can forward it with a negative or positive recommendation. It's really up to council. They can decide what role you want to play in that. Where a municipality has clear policy around subdivision, the Agricultural Land Reserve, or there's strong language or regulatory framework within the city, then council can play a much stronger role at this point.
That's a fantastic answer. Thank you. That's great. So I think it's clear council does want to move this forward, but with its concerns. So that's what the amendment reflects. So I don't need to speak any further. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Zerillo on the amendment.
Yeah, on the amendment. So I'm happy with the amendment taking out the support, because I was uncomfortable with that piece, but it was mentioned, do we have a goal? Does this city have a goal for agricultural land reserve and for food security? And do we have a food security policy? Like, have we actually had a thorough discussion about our vision for this? And I would be nervous to put anything forward, because my experience in this chair has been, as soon as we open Pandora's box this much, it's done. So I still have reservations if we don't have goals or a firm policy. Do we have those, either of those two things?
No, very few communities with our amount of agriculture certainly would have that. With the region that we participate in, Metro Vancouver has a food security discussion and a food security strategy policies, but local governments, I'm not certain even that Pitt Meadows or Surrey would have such a thing. It's more of a regional issue, and this food security is regional, obviously, because New Westminster can't really participate much in the food security discussion and more, whatever. Yeah. Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Yeah, that's correct. My recollection is particularly at the regional level, and that was one of the drivers in Metro Vancouver's regional growth strategy with the conservation, the agricultural land designation was to preserve that agricultural land base across the region for food production purposes.
That's a hard one. Okay, well, I'd still like to see more discussion around this table before we did that, so I'll be holding out.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. The question is the amendment. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Zarrillo is opposed to the amendment. And now the motion as amended. I've still got my reservations. Councillor O'Neill, on the motion as amended, did you have anything further? You said you had nothing further, but
I didn't have anything further on the amendment.
I didn't believe you then.
Yeah, it wasn't on the amendment, but on the main motion, I believe I moved it. And I receive great satisfaction in seeing the staff report on page 3 talks about the proposed lot sizes being substantial, no overall general loss of ALR land. I've actually ridden my bicycle past this farm several times, and I think it was just last season, during the harvest season, there were some pretty impressive machines out there harvesting the blueberries. They look like little cottages on wheels, quite something. And so they put a lot of investment into this land. I can't see them walking away from it. And even if they did want to, they have the right to do that. But it's a beautiful land, and I think this, in my mind, the way I look at this, it sort of what keeps the family involved in the farm. It's probably more likely to prosper as a farm. More people involved in it, staying close to the land, and fending off those bears as well. And there's an electrical fence all around there, by the way, now, so you dare not touch that fence. I have not touched it. Come close to it a few times. So I'll be supporting the amended recommendation. Thank you.
Clarification, the electric fence is not around the farm, the subject farm.
Oh.
I believe it's around the farm next to it.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I know it undoubtedly comes as a shock. Mr. McIntyre. Mr. McIntyre, be more positive. Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. It's been a little while since I've been out there, but I believe you're right. I think it's the lands across from the park, the Minikata Park, which is the next parcel to the east.
Okay. So, seeing no other speakers, the question is the motion as amended. All in favor? All opposed? I'm opposed, as is Councillor Zarrillo. The motion carries.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item 7 was previously disposed of by Councillor earlier in the meeting, so we shall move to item 8. Item 8 pertains to the Coquitlam 125, its revised final celebrations program and budget. Staff recommendations that Council endorse the final list of programs, events, and legacy projects, as well as the revised final budget of $854,000 for the Coquitlam 125 anniversary celebration, as recommended by the Coquitlam 125 Anniversary Steering Task Force. as found in attachment 1 to the report. And 2, that council authorize allocation of additional funding in the amount of $516,000 to support Coquitlam 125 as follows. $130,000 from the Community Capital Fund to support the planning and marketing activities during 2015. And B, $386,000 from the Infrastructure Reserve to implement the celebration events and legacy projects in 2016.
We're going to have it on the floor first. Moved by Councillor O'Neill. Second by Councillor Asmundson. Councillor Reid.
I'd like to first ask for separation.
It is separated. Okay.
And so now I had a bunch of notes on my other package. So I want to ask about the 386 and the 130 split. So I have 2 questions. What is the amount of sort of legacy projects, actually physical things that will be left? And I still think that more money should come from community capital than from infrastructure reserve.
Mr. Alvarado.
Okay, community legacy, certainly the Salmon Legacy project, the community legacy, Lights at Lafarge, there's some investment there that's around $200,000.
It was more than that.
Here's here. Maybe Mary can clarify. And just to note, we feel the split that we've identified in terms of the community capital infrastructure is reasonably appropriate, and it was really to just not to deplete the community capital fund, which is obviously topped up every year through casino dollars, but really we're okay with council's direction in that regard. We've kind of focused primarily on the total dollars being within the budget, the original budget estimate. Maybe Mary, Karen's here. I'm sorry, Karen Bassey's here. She's right behind me. I didn't see her. Karen?
So we got the total amount of the legacy.
So that's correct. The Salmon Legacy project, which is just over $100,000. Also the Lights Lafarge, because there'll be a number of installations that will continue into next year and onwards. And there is a number of marketing elements that will continue. So we are having a promotional video that's a kickoff as well as a wrap-up. So those as well will be legacy elements. And also there's going to be a call to action encouraging the community to come out and provide archival material, pictures, artifacts, which then would become part of our legacy project as well.
So can you give me a number?
Not for the archival, I couldn't, but the 2 elements I would say would be the Lights at Lafarge, a portion of those costs, the capital costs, as well as all of the Salmon Legacy elements as well.
Maybe I should have been writing them all down. Can you give me a number?
About 185, yeah, about $185,000 to $200,000.
So when you're talking about the community capital fund and not depleting it, those are the monies that I consider tourism dollars. I consider dollars that are not tax dollars, and I prefer to see the majority come from the community capital fund as much as we can. If we deplete it this year, then we'll have more money coming in later this year. So to me, it's more important to use those funds than to take from the infrastructure reserve. So while I have no problem with the revised final budget, I didn't have any problem with the other budget. I just do not like the way the funds are allocated. So I would be supporting the list of programs, but I would not be supporting funding being allocated this way. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marsden.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking this back and the committee taking a second look at it. I think the committee's done a great job of coming up with a suite of events that will ensure that our 125th is a great celebration. That said, I remain challenged with the budget itself. I appreciate there was several revisions made. Some scaling back in some areas. I think that was wonderful. The one glaring item that bothered me in the presentation was the $79,000 attributable to management oversight and staff costs associated with that. I expressed my concerns about that. I expressed my concerns that the initial staff allotment was going to be $120,000, and the final number comes in at $202,000. So we missed it by 80%. Perhaps my feelings might be less harsh if we were closer on the original estimate. But to look and place $79,000 into this from a management perspective, when we've got the personnel, very, very qualified personnel in our Parks and Rec department, we've got our cultural service manager that we hired last year. I'm truly challenged that we couldn't find a way to massage that number and perhaps say, you know what, we can absorb that elsewhere. So I appreciate all Councillor Reid's comments with regards to what comes from community capital versus infrastructure reserve. I echo those comments. I think as much as possible should come from the capital fund. But I cannot seem to get past the staff line item on this. And for that reason, I'm going to be, I will not be giving this my support. Thank you.
Okay. So oops, Councillor Zerillo again.
Or do you want me to go?
Oh, go ahead.
So I think this was the budget that we gave right from the start, and I'm very grateful for all the work that the task force did for this. So I don't have concerns about that. I think we knew what that budget was, and I think we gave them the opportunity to spend it any way they want. The one thing I'm looking for, and I probably can't get it today, but I would like to get it as follow-up, is just the ongoing operational costs of the capital investments that we do have. So we're going to have increased lights at Lafarge, which is going to be increased labor every year. The ongoing website you talked about there being that, what is that going to cost us? And also the Salmon Legacy projects. I don't know what else there is as far as capital investments where we're going to have maintenance or operational expenses after the fact. But I just want to understand what are those going to be going forward every year? Because, I mean, I know this is this spend right now, but we are going to have residual costs with some of the things that we've done. So I'd like to see that at a future time. Sooner rather than later would be awesome. But for sure, I mean, this is the budget we had right from the start, and I'm fine with it.
Thank you, Councillor Rasmussen.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, Your Worship, Councillor Wilson was the next in line.
Yes, but I completely overlooked him again. Yeah.
Hence
I overlooked him on the weekend. In fact, he was the only one I didn't introduce at an event.
That's why I threw a lifesaver out.
There you go. I thank you very much. What the heck? Councillor Wilson, do you have anything to say? Nope, nothing.
Carry on.
Councillor Rasmussen.
I really want to thank the staff and the leadership of the group for the work that they did in revising the budget. It was a very challenging task that we had to come up with an initial budget a year ago when a lot of these events weren't really planned in detail, and so to come up with an initial budget and try to keep as close as we could to that initial budget obviously is challenging as these events started to be planned in more detail. So I appreciate that. In terms of the legacies, there's tons of great legacies in this plan. I know it is a lot of money. An example would be the lights on Lafarge. Well, that's something that over the next 5 years we would have done anyways. This just speeds it up and makes it happen a little sooner. So in terms of an investment there, we would have done it anyways. The maintenance would be there anyways. And it's something that our community really wants. Things like the block parties, I mean, that goes to trying to make our neighborhoods and our blocks a lot more connected, neighbors supporting each other, getting to know each other, helping elderly people take out their garbage in the morning, all that stuff that we hear about, challenges out there. So this does a lot for that. The neighborhood nights, it brings them to another level where they'll be great, large neighborhood events on an ongoing basis, and will allow those neighborhood nights to bring in more sponsorship dollars in the future, because of this investment that we put in 2016. So they can become even more self-sufficient and save the city money there as well. The Kaleidoscope Festival, I think, is going to be a great ongoing legacy in terms of a 2-day event ongoing that our city will host and bring in, thousands of people from outside of the city. So I'm really proud of the events that have been planned. I'm really proud of the work that the committee has done and the staff has done, especially on coming up with this detailed budget. And I think our community, we heard great results from our Community in Bloom process and the 5 blooms and how great our city looked to the judges there. Well, I think after the 125 celebrations, our community is going to be extremely proud of what our community has been able to pull off, and very happy with the legacies going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Now it's Councillor Asmussen.
Well, thank you, Mayor Stewart. Finally, it is. I'm going to agree with Councillor Reid on the allocation of funds and where they come from. I have the same concerns and same desires that it should really be coming, majority of this money should be coming from community capital, not from infrastructure reserve, and I think that's where the money should be coming from. That's non-tax money. I think we're having a type of festivals and stuff like this, it should be coming out of that fund. I will agree that the budget has come down somewhat, and I thank the committee for their work in looking at that and bringing that down through Chair Wilson on that. I still think through to staff that we need to keep a sharp pencil on this program and look for savings as we go along. I look at the community engagement artists, and Councillor Reid was talking earlier about what are some of our legacy projects. We have some salmon legacy projects, we have some lighting in here, but it talks in here some temporary or permanent visual installations. Now, I don't understand what the permanent visual, is that the videos, the marketing, what are we talking about in that community artist engagement? I mean, it's a fair chunk of money. It's $117,000 that we're spending on that. And I'm not clear as to what we're really being doing with that.
Through the chair, the community engagement artists are, we don't currently have a contract with them, but we do have a proposal in place. In terms of the temporary permanent installation, the concept that they have presented is the idea of getting the community engaged and actually creating a lasting element. So throughout the year in different workshops and different events, the community would come together and participate in actually creating that item, which would then be on display at the Kaleidoscope Festival, and then have the ability to be on display at a later event or in other years.
Okay. Those are some of the things I think we need to, as staff goes through this, look at the scope of this project and the cost of it. Is that we're paying $117,000 for some sort of art sculpture, or the process to engage the artist to create something?
The element that I was just describing is actually only one element of what the community engagement artists are offering. They are also coming on board to animate and activate all of the signature events that will be happening throughout the year. They're also going to be facilitating a number of workshops that are geared at collecting stories, because the theme of the Coquitlam 125 being Coquitlam stories told, stories shared, and that's a huge part of there, is just engaging the community in workshops and in events, so we have a lasting legacy.
Okay. I will move this forward. I'm still not completely comfortable with the budget at where it is. I would like to see staff, through Mr. Alueva, continue to work with this item, and I think Councillor Morrison said on some of the labor and some other costs to refine some things in this, but I think they're within the parameters from the earlier report and the guidance that we did give them at that time. I think those are my comments moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
And further to my discussion here, I've been sort of looking it over, and if 186 was what we have that will be standing, that we can touch, see, and feel, just like lights and the little salmon that we're getting. If we took $200,000 from infrastructure reserve account, as you have it here, and put it into the community capital fund. So otherwise, the split would be 330 out of community capital and 186 out of infrastructure reserve. Now, if at this point, I don't have my other documents from the last time when I had everything written down, so I'm not sure what is in community capital right now. If it's not 330, we still get another intake in March, I believe, in 2016. So it's not like we're not going to have the money there. That way I feel that we're being fair to everyone. And it is our 125th birthday. And I think that's a big celebration because hopefully I'll never get there. But in any event, that's how I would like to move an amendment. That would be 330 out of community capital and 186 out of infrastructure reserve, as it would be something that would be left.
Okay, the amendment.
Anita seconded it? Oh, sorry, I didn't know you heard.
Nope, I got it. So the amendment is that A would read 330 and B would read 186.
Yes.
It's been moved by Councillor Reid, seconded by Councillor Zerillo. Councillor O'Neill.
So I just wanted to get some very specific staff response on that to find out if that is doable or is going to create some sort of unanticipated issue.
Mr. Ottawa.
Your Worship, there is sufficient in the community. The community capital fund right now has an unallocated balance, so total unallocated funds in the amount of $458,000. So we could, I'm not the manager of finance, but I'm sure she'll be okay with this. That would be $330,000 from the community capital, and then the infrastructure reserve would be $186. I believe that we did put the numbers in here in case because it did come up at the committee meeting on the potential change in the accounts. So there is sufficient in both those accounts.
Okay.
That's fine. Thank you.
Yep. I appreciate Councillor Reid's amendment. I'm actually I'm supportive of it. One of my concerns here is that I don't want our community to get to misinterpret this. It's one of the concerns I had originally with the two staff recommendations. I anticipated someone's going to come up with a way to add the two. One says revise the budget downward to 854 and then authorize an additional 516. Is it possible that some reporter is going to put it out as 1,400 rather 1.4 million total? I'm not blaming them. That's just the realities that these things look complex and sometimes things get tweeted out as something and etc. So this perhaps more accurately reflects what's actually being achieved here is a couple $100,000 worth of legacy elements, and then the actual investment for the celebration is clearly shown as being $330,000 in funding that coming out of the casino fund rather than out of tax dollars. I think that's the I also want to echo the thanks that others have expressed to the committee. I attended portions of that. I was able to attend portions of the meeting, and I appreciate that the committee had worked hard to fulfill council's mandate to go back, have another look. Let's see where we can find the savings. I know that staff also supported them in working through the numbers ahead of time so that they had some decisions to make. They made the decisions, they made the tough choices, and I think now we're at a point where I'm very comfortable with it's both the celebration elements but also the legacy elements that we're going to have for the 125th year of this city, and so I'll be supporting the amendment. Anyone else speaking to the amendment? Seeing none, the question is A is now 330 and B is 186. All in favor? All opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Councillor, with our tremendous thanks to the brilliance of Councillor Reid, the motion as amended then is to endorse the final list of programs and to allocate the funding of 330 and 186. Any further discussion on that? All in favor? All opposed? Mr. Clerk.
Your Worship, there had been a previous indication of desire to separate. Now, the amendment may have adjusted that, but that was the current agreement on the floor, so I just wanted to get clarification.
No, point well taken, and I had taken it that since the mover of the amendment had included both of them in her amendment.
Just so that that all voters are aware.
Okay, we can, we'll do it again. Is there a request for separation? Seeing none. The motion is the two recommendations, as amended. All in favor? All opposed? Councillor Marsden is still opposed. Motion carries.
Next item, item 9, concerns the proposed Fraser Sewerage Area Amendment for Northeast Coquitlam. Staff recommendations that Council support amending the Fraser Sewerage Area boundary to include properties in Northeast Coquitlam as shown in Attachment A to the report. And 2, that staff be directed to forward this report to Metro Vancouver Board and the Greater Vancouver Sewerage and Drainage District Board and request their approval of the proposed FSA boundary amendment.
Councillor Asmunsen moving it and Councillor O'Neill seconding it. Anybody else? All in favor? All opposed? Councillor Zrillo is opposed. The motion carries.
Next item, item 10, concerns the draft 2015-2020 Coquitlam Tourism Strategy. Staff recommendations that Council approve the 2015 to 2020 Coquitlam Tourism Strategy attached to the report before you.
Moved.
Okay, it's moved by whom?
Me.
Councillor Asmunsen, second by Councillor Hodge. Councillor Asmunsen.
I think I'm going to support this. I'm glad to see this report here. I think staff have done a very good job with the tourism file and moving the tourism forward. I think, though, that I've been here before where we had a tourism manager, a tourism direction, and we let it fall off the rails. And the report talks about stop and starting. That's hurt our ability to gain tourism, move tourism forward in this region. So I think moving forward, we need to look at the position of our tourism manager, which is presently funded out of casino funds, and looking towards making that a stabilized position, stabilized funding for the long term in our tourism portfolio and program moving forward. So I'm supportive of this, but those are a couple of issues I think that we have to move forward on at budget. When council moves forward to budget, I think those need to be looked at because the report does, and we have in the past stopped and started our tourism program, which has hurt the development and bringing tourism into the Coquitlam area. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, thank you. My architect has given me beautiful drawings of a lovely house that he thinks I might want. And he wants to know, pending costing, whether I love the design or not. And I love the design. It's on a, it's open plan, nice windows, it's environmentally friendly, there's not too big, not too small. It's just perfect. All the best equipment and all the best building materials. And so, of course, I love it. This is great. But he's got to come back to me and tell me how much it costs. And then that's when the real decision will be made to find out if I can afford this or not. So, yes, I love this beautiful design. I love this lovely plan. It's very nice. But as it's noted in the financial implications, there's no immediate financial implications right now, just as when the architect gives me the beautiful drawing for the house, there's nothing immediate about that. But it would contain a commitment to an ongoing tourism program that would require a sustaining funding model, which staff will report on in early 2016. So in early 2016 is when the real decision is going to come from this quarter anyway. So I'll support moving this on, but I'll be waiting until 2016 to figure out if we can afford this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Well, it's with great pride that I'm so happy with our tourism strategy. I'm so happy with our economic development department, and it's about time a city of our size moved in this area. As it says here, on a global scale, the tourism is being recognized as one of the fastest growing sectors. And let's face it, if we're going to get all these people moving here, we need some jobs. And whether we get them through tourism or economic development, I believe it's going to be a combination of both. And I think it's important to keep this moving forward. So I have lots to say about this, but I think we need to have a more fulsome discussion on the whole tourism economic development. But the strategy that is attached, I think, is a great piece of work. Thank you to staff, and I'll be fully supporting it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Councillor Zarrillo.
Well, I would just like to say thank you so much to the group that worked on this, because it came out very manageable. Basically 3 goals, and that's wonderful. One of the things that I like about it is the part of the vision statement where it talks about enriching residents' experiences, and I think that's very insightful and very interesting, that we're going to be focused too on our residents, not just bringing in other people, but improving the quality of life and experience for our residents. So thanks for that. My comment would just be about the focus on the rating, wanting to move our rating up 2 out of 10, up to 4 out of 10, up to 6 out of 10. I'd love to see us focus less on what our tourism rating is and more on the economic return. In the vision statement, it talks about expanding local jobs and prosperity. Could we decide on what those measures are going to be right away and start benchmarking now? And just let's have our success be based on measures that we decide rather than externally this BC rating system. I think that the BC rating system can limit us. I think we got way more potential. And thank you so much for this. I'm excited to see it go. I think it's very manageable, and I'm excited to see the branding.
Thank you. All done. Motion is the draft tourism strategy. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Next item, item 11, is the Metro Vancouver Board and Brief for their meeting of October 9th. The city's representatives to the board are available to respond to any questions that council may have, and the staff recommendations that council receive for information in the Metro Vancouver Board and Brief.
Councillor O'Neill, with his customary question over the board and brief.
This is a question about the Zero Waste Communications Program, and I actually raised the same question at a council meetings a couple of years ago, wondering why they were spending, it was several $100,000 on a Grinch-like campaign to persuade people not to buy things for each other at Christmas. This is the Create Memories, Not Garbage Christmas campaign. And this just irks me. And there's no measure of whether or not this is successful or not. It's a feel-good, or it's actually a feel-bad program that Metro Vancouver puts out, making us feel guilty about buying each other gifts at Christmas. And so create memories, don't give gifts. I don't like it. I think it's a waste of money. They shouldn't be doing it. So was this discussed at all at any of the committees or the board meetings that our members were present, at which our members were present? And was any rationale given about this to support this ongoing program, Grinch-like program?
Three sizes too small. Do you have anything, Councillor Hodge?
I don't know if it's in this, because we're
trying to remember.
We're going into budgets this week, so that would be part of the budget discussion. I know that I raised some other concerns about the overall budget in the Zero Waste Committee, but it was when I voted against it was more around the tipping fees and some of the other things that were being introduced. Certainly, this has come up for discussion, particularly at Zero Waste, because this program is paid for primarily out of the tipping fees. When we had the discussion earlier in the spring, when the fees were originally reduced, committee members asked how much of these campaigns and other expenses could be reduced because the tipping fees were coming down. Do note that there is a new campaign that's part of this. And that is that the Food Isn't Garbage campaign, and this is an effort to reduce the amount of food waste that's going in, primarily for spoil dates and other things, and so you'll be seeing more about that. The Food Isn't Garbage campaign, as you'll recall, some of the cute drawings where there are illustrations of watermelons and other things, and that campaign has actually been very well received and has helped to contribute to the reduction in food waste that's going out. But I do take your, or that's the Love Food, Hate Waste campaign is the new one. So those two are sort of focusing on that. But you're right, the Create Memories Not Garbage campaign has been running for a couple of years. I don't know how much that's going to be. I guess it'll be at Christmas time, but much of their focus right now is on reducing food waste.
And that's where it should be, not on the
other
former.
campaign.
Thank you.
I will take that and convey that at the next
Thank you.
time. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, and I want to thank you for your very astute question about the regional affordable housing strategy. That I'm chair of that committee, and I take your question to mean, are we wasting anything in that regard? And we're going to great lengths to try to get public input right now on the regional affordable housing strategy. It's publicly available. It certainly is publicly commentable. And we encourage the public to have a read and find out what the region is doing. The region actually has about 5,000 housing units, but the affordable housing strategy is more aimed at the housing units that the region doesn't own, the housing units that we as communities are trying to, are responsible for approving and regulating. And are there some best practices that municipalities have adopted across the region, including Coquitlam's Housing Choices program? Can we examine those things, perhaps share them with our member colleagues across the region, their successes, their tweaking, and to try to, as much as we possibly can, foster greater affordability within the housing market, not so much within the subsidized market, because the subsidies are not there anymore, but rather to what extent can we play a role in the housing market in trying to foster greater affordability and a wider range of housing choices across the region. Oh, I'm sorry, you didn't ask that question? My apologies. Oh, there you go. Well, thank you. Was there... Yes. Yes, Councillor O'Neill now no longer has to take back the very expensive and large wrapped gifts, Christmas gifts he's already bought for all of his council colleagues. Seeing none others, the motion is the board and brief. All in favor? No, the motion is not the board and brief. Now it is. Councillor Asmundson. Councillor Asmundson, and seconded by Councillor O'Neill, the board and brief. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Moved by Councillor O'Neill, seconded by Councillor Zarrillo to adjourn. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Are there any questions from the audience on tonight's agenda items? Are there any questions from the audience on the Are there any questions from anyone in the audience who might be celebrating a birthday tomorrow? Anybody at all? Nobody? Well, then I'll have to say good night. Thank you so much for coming. Have a good evening.